Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be with you. Actually, this is my first ever live webinar. I did talk in front of a live audience, but never a virtual one. So thank the guys at Google and Open Legacy for inviting me to tell the case study and the success story of Leumi with both API and Open Legacy. Just 1 second. Okay, so who am I? As Maria said, and as I said, my name is Eli Dotan. I'm 37 years old. I'm married and I have 2 amazing kids. My current position is the group manager of the middleware, R&D and operations in Bank Leumi in Israel. Our operation consists of 14 professionals, which are divided across 3 different teams. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the talk layout I want to share with you today. So we'll start by introducing the business landscape that led to the API-enabled middleware approach in Leumi. We will talk a little bit about why the old ways, the ESB Centric approach, was not good enough for us. And then we'll move on to discuss why we changed that approach to a microservices and APIs-enabled one, and how it served us. And after that, I would like to share with you some of the lessons that I personally learned along the way with my team. I think that many of you might find some of them valuable, or you could relate and see how those could impact your own enterprise or organization. And we will finish off with a future outlook of what Leumi plans ahead for years 2021 and 2022 in regards with the vision of middleware. Okay, so the business landscape. As some of you may know, others may not, Israel adopted in the past 2 years, it started and truly adopted in 2 months ago, the open banking regulation as it was adopted in Europe several years ago. Actually, it's the PSD2 standard that was imported into Israel with slight variation from the European flavor, and that was quite of a shock to banks in Israel, because that meant that the banks would need to consider for the first time ever to open their technological gates to third parties and other participants, and that caused a lot of confusion at first, since it meant that the gates needed to be open to unidentified and unknown parties in unknown numbers, and of course with an unpredicted workload that would come streaming in those gates into the very foundations of the bank's infrastructure. In Leumi, after carefully thinking the situation, several decisions have been made to embark on a process to adapt to the new regulation, which was instated just 2 months ago, and in order to achieve shorter time to market, cheaper infrastructure, and of course to support the modern technologies that we expect those partners to operate in, which means basically, to make it short, to support RESTful APIs in a manner consistent with the year 2021. Okay, a few words about the old ways of what we did up until now. So up until now, our infrastructure was focused around an ESB Centric architecture. As you all may know from your own organization, that has been the trend and the dominating approach for the past, let's say, 10 or 20 years. The core system at Leumi is a mainframe. There's a mainframe computer holding all the old and some of the new core systems. That's on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you can see the XML gateways that guarded the entrances and to Leumi's infrastructure and inside the networks themselves. And on the middle was an ESB engine that did much of the heavy lifting needed to do in that environment. It not only bridged to the mainframe itself, but also orchestrated services, transformed the data, and obviously also performed some business logic when needed in different scenarios. Okay, so what's wrong with that? Well, that was suitable for that time, but things have changed. Several points drove us to change the approach that we take at Leumi. First of all, ESB engines and systems are very, very costly platforms. They're one of the most or the priciest pieces of software out there. These engines performed both infrastructural and application logic heavy lifting, and that meant that we needed to suit the needs, the application needs of each system differently. We had tailor-made solutions per demand or per system, and that also led to high time to market. So it meant that for each service that we made custom-made, we had to spend about several days per service to expose it. Now, currently after the change, we're talking about a service per day and much less in different circumstances. Another point is the point of the identity conflict, and you will see as we go along that I will link to that as one of the major differentiators in approach that could drive your business forward. So the identity conflict is the conflict that each middleware team and system has on the spectrum between being an application or being an infrastructure. On the old ways, we did not clearly identify what exactly are we. We were expected to do both infrastructural work and application work, and that was confusing. Didn't allow us to put in place processes to make our job faster, easier, and better. And the last point I want to mention is that when you do custom-made application heavy lifting, it means that you might come to a stop when you see that you have a monopoly of certain people that possess most of the knowledge, and then to maintain those systems, it doesn't matter how big your team is. If one or two persons have the knowledge about those systems, you can't scale your operation, you can't support or onboard many of these custom-made solutions anymore. And then we decided to move forward, as I said, to an API-centric architecture. We partnered with both Apigee and Open Legacy, but before Apigee and Open Legacy came the first decision, which was to switch over to microservices. That decision is part of a grander decision and strategy in Leumi, and during that, following that decision, some of the heavy lifting that the ESB engines used to do were shifted towards the microservices and the granular components that were not possible beforehand. Beforehand, we had WAS, JBus, IIS application service that did the heavy lifting. They were monolithics. They could not hold single granular pieces of code that do only transformation or only orchestration or small pieces of business logic. But now, after we shifted to microservices, they could. So the ESB has eventually been stripped from a high percentage of what it used to do. And to enable this ecosystem to thrive, to expose the services correctly, to secure it, to give it eyes and monitoring and ears, and to manage the lifecycle as needed, of course, we needed in place a good API management solution. That's Apigee. And of course, we needed to continue bridging our applications to the core system, which is the mainframe, and we chose Open Legacy. Why did we do that? Why did we do that change? So first of all, regarding ESB, we wanted to save money. As I stated earlier, the ESB is a very pricey piece of software, and that was okay when you did the heavy lifting, but now when someone else does the heavy lifting, the only function had remained in it was basically bridging to the mainframe. And if that's the case, then Open Legacy does that much better, faster, and cheaper. Time to markets are dramatically improved. We no longer need to do custom-made XML gateway and ESB services, took days per service. Now we can shift over to Apigee and Open Legacy, and now we are down to less than a day per service and counting. And of course, it enabled us for the first time to speak REST. So we can support RESTful APIs as a native solution. The products, both Apigee and Open Legacy, are native through RESTful APIs, and that shows a great value to us. Okay, so Now for what I think is the most interesting part of this talk is the takeaways, the conclusions that we had on the lessons learned during this journey. So the first takeaway, maybe the most important one, is more of a methodological one: simplify and focus. So as I stated earlier, there's a spectrum, and you have to choose where you want to place your organization and a middleware solution. The spectrum runs between an application on the left-hand side and the infrastructure on the right-hand side. And Leumi chose the side which is closer to the infrastructure side. But that doesn't mean that's the case for every enterprise. Anywhere on the spectrum is legitimate for the specific use case of every specific enterprise. And if you want some hints about how you can decide, then you should consider the matter of tenancy. How many applications or products do you serve on your solution? If it's one or two, if you're a single tenancy or a dual tenancy solution, then you have the privilege to leverage the infrastructural work in the very foundations of the solution you implement to serve the applications themselves and to closely couple the application to the solution that you do. But if you're a multi-tenancy solution like in Leumi, you need to support tens, if not hundreds of different systems, then of course the common criteria becomes more narrow, and then you need to think of a solution that will fit all. You can't just look at application A as your target for solutions, and then when application B onboards to your services, you can no longer support it because B and A have different expectations. Okay, so once you identified where you are on the spectrum, what we did for one is instate a clear policy. It wasn't always like that. We started off without a clear policy, and we got tangled around in this tangle between application and infrastructure, even inside the API management. And for us at Leumi, that meant that we saw a mismatch between the man hours and the ability to scale, or if to be precise, the inability to scale when we started. And of course, the mismatch between expectations of different areas of our enterprise. So what we did is to instate a clear policy. We coordinated with everyone, architecture, cybersecurity teams, management, business, to come up with a list of expectations, what our solutions do and what they don't do. And we stuck to it. Once we did that, we could streamline the work much faster and benefit greater value. But you need to remember that even if you instate a clear policy, always remember the 80-20 rule. That means that in 20% of the cases, you will need to make exceptions for your own policy. That might make sense. For example, if you consider that an application needs you to do something that you don't normally do, then as Sandra and Maria stated previously, you need to think of the applications and developers as your clients and customers. And you need to engage with them, you need to delight them. And in some cases, yes, you need to break the rules to make life easier for them, because it makes sense. It saves money. It's much easier. They have a lack of knowledge, etc. All of these circumstances would allow you to go beyond the terms of your own policy. Takeaway 2. Also a very important takeaway is go all in on monitoring. So we at Leumi, we understand, actually we've been doing that for several years now, but specifically for APIs, we understood that we needed perfect visibility into what's going on, which APIs are being invoked and when, why, including the ability to move from 20,000 feet to a drill down of the single transaction, including the payload that was passed from side to side, the errors, the metadata, etc. So we use the tremendously versatile and modular engines of Apigee and planted inside Apigee pieces of code and software that would benefit us in doing so. And now we're able to have a very clear view of a perfect transactional monitoring from side to side. But that's not all, because we also understood that your dashboards belong to everyone. So what we did is we tried to promote self-service with the other members and teams in Leumi, and right now, actually, we're in the middle of that process of trying to enabling them and giving them our own data. And what happens is that we see great value for them. I think that's part of the approach of having a proper API management. It means that if your developer has an API, then you give him the framework to monitor it. And that elevates him not only in production areas, but also as he develops the API and goes through integration. And last but not least is the stitching of the data. So it's not enough to focus on the middleware. You need to, where you can, it's not always possible, but when you can, you need to integrate the data between the different endpoints. So at Leumi, we integrated the data that we present between API and Open Legacy. And we are moving forward to also doing it for all microservices to see an integrated view of everything that goes in our system. Third takeaway is about automation. Sounds trivial, but we need to state that Open Legacy. Look, Open Legacy is a great code factory, and as a great code factory, it has the benefit of allowing us to automate the processes that we do. The output of the great implementation of Open Legacy is a microservice that we can promote between environments, and promotion, seamless promotion in our Kubernetes solution is one of the better catalysts for the extreme time to market improvements that we saw. So yes, it took us some time to do the initial setup because Bank Leumi needed its own customizations and standards, but that's a fixed cost. Once you invest that cost, then the time to market is very, very short to promote services up the ladder onto production systems. And API itself, API, as I said, has a very robust management API, and very modular. So we're actually about 70% through automating the promotion of services in API seamlessly between environments. That's a big deal for us because we don't have a single API planet from dev to production. We have two different installations and planets, and being able to move up and down on this ladder is something that is very, very not trivial to us. And now we're able to do that because API supports that. I want to state that two little comments. We did need to write our own API Git integration because API is not Git enabled, and Bank Leumi relies heavily on Git. And we invested a lot of time for analysis of the dependencies in API. So single API proxy can have various dependencies, it's like the difference between the tip of the iceberg and what lies underneath. And our promotion would only be complete if we understand the entire dependency tree of a single component. So these are two things that we added to invest in, but they work perfectly with the API's robust engines. Okay, so for the future outlook, what do we plan for our middleware? So as a vision, I think personally that middleware is something that should be trivial in the sense that it shouldn't get in the way or be of any burden to the developer's lifecycle, the software lifecycle. And that means being able to automate both when you provision services and when you promote them, and to be able to give that as self-service to developer teams. It also means that you need to give them insights and visibility to self-cater when they operate to integrate their own developments. We further this vision, and we believe that in a year or so we'll achieve this entire goal throughout the middleware ecosystem in Leumi. Amongst the things that are on plan is first of all, create a single pipeline with Open Legacy and API. So once a transaction has been exposed through Open Legacy, it will automatically be exposed also through API. We have the vision of a copybook to service in 5 minutes. So you drop a copybook to a folder, and voila, you have a microservice running on every environment right away. Provisioning API proxies in API based on templates Of course, rolling out developers portal, which is something that's more tricky at Leumi because we have some custom needs that I won't get into in this session, but if you're interested, you can write to me afterward and I will answer gladly. And of course, the strategic decision at Leumi to implement an API-first approach and connect the work of the systems analyst and the building of the Swagger to trigger all the needed components to expose the services throughout the system. Okay, thank you all for your time.